Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast. I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And I'm Darcy Melton.
Thank you all so much for joining us. If we do sound tired, it's because today we're going to be talking about the most beautiful city in Italy you might not have heard of, Matera.
And in fact, we were there just yesterday. We took a little overnight trip and got back this morning, a couple hours ago, had lunch, had a nap, and now we are recording. So we sound kind of sleepy maybe, but excited.
But very excited. So don't let our tone of monotony make you think that we did not have fun and do not have a lot to share with you. We both very much enjoyed the trip, that as impromptu as it was, and thought, you know what? It's a perfect time, Tuesday before this podcast goes out, to record an episode on it because it's super fresh and we want to just go straight, basically go straight from the trip into the podcast without being like, well, we'll go in a week or two, we'll try to remember how it was.
Right, exactly.
And before we get into that, I just thought it was a fun, interesting piece of Italy news is that the government agency in charge of anti-monopoly sort of investigations has charged 7 companies with basically using bots to buy up tickets for the Colosseum. They have fined them 20 million euros, and it's 7 companies between Italy, France, Germany, Belgium, maybe UK, maybe just Italy, maybe just other Italy ones. And essentially, though, what's happening, and it's something that people even notice online, is that it's impossible to get tickets anymore for the Colosseum. And so what's happening is they find both the people who supply the tickets as well as these companies, because what was happening is just like any other...
It's like a ticket reseller. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that was essentially it, yeah. So it's because I thought somehow the park of Colosseum, I guess, from this article, and I guess it wasn't very clear. Maybe I didn't understand it, which was probably more likely. But it was almost as if they were saying the Colosseum itself doesn't sell the tickets, but it's another company that sells the tickets for the Colosseum, which is weird because it's a archaeological park that.
Yeah, I thought it was like Parco
Archeologico
di Colosseo.
And something like that. So I'm surprised that essentially, and it could be again that this is like because there's a company contracted through them essentially that does all those tours. Although this is a verified tour, not a verified tour, but this is a real tour. We're not
official.
Just official. Thank you. And it seems like they've been kind of keeping a lot of the tickets for that because it's a higher price, and it's why so many times when you find Colosseum tickets, a lot of them come with hotel pickup or some sort of tour, is because they want to get more money for them, so they always bundle it with something else rather than just reselling you the ticket for 18 euros. So they all got fined. Various amounts totaling about 20 million euros. In order to sort of start clamping down on, and since like the 90s though, so this is not just like in the last year or two, it's between like 94, I want to say, in 2024, they basically found that, and most recently, obviously because computer bots in the early 90s is not as prevalent potentially as it is now, they were using these computer bots to immediately buy up the tickets. So it was becoming incredibly difficult to find tickets, especially because I think it's the city of Rome, if not the region, set a maximum number of people as 6,000 per day at the Colosseum. So it's not like, oh, we can just wait. It's like, no, the tickets are actually sold out, like a concert or something. So
there was just a big investigation that wrapped up recently.
Yep.
They charged people. Interesting.
Some kind of interesting. So hopefully this does lead to those of you thinking about coming to Rome, especially for the Jubilee, which is this year. Hopefully it does lead to a little bit less competition around the tickets because it's kind of a madhouse and it is worse than it needs to be, I think, genuinely.
It's also, I know it's part of traveling. It's also become like part of concerts and different events. It's like a sense of scalping and reselling.
Absolutely.
Where, like you said, things are repackaged and put together with other items. And sometimes it can be great and super convenient to get lots of different tickets for things in one package, but there's always a sense, for me, there's often a sense that you're being scammed, and I really like buying tickets from the original point of sale. So
for sure,
hopefully,
especially with the whole Ticketmaster thing, just it's like I don't know, people talk about you used to be able to see a concert for $4 or $5, and now it's like it's a $75 ticket. That's before all the taxes and fees and this and that. So it's kind of a shame, but hopefully this is the beginning of a change in Italy, at least.
Sweet.
So that was my news. That was my big news. Has nothing to do with Matera, but it's just thought it was pertinent for those of you thinking about visiting Rome this year.
Sweet.
Or, I mean, any time after this investigation, hopefully. And before we get started, I just want to also say thank you to anybody who is listening. We do genuinely appreciate it. And we appreciate your reviews and your kind words and genuinely just you listening, because I think it helps us in the algorithm or something. If you'd like to follow us, we would genuinely appreciate it. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts that you can follow us on, we'd very much appreciate a follow. As well as if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or you just want to follow along, we have a Blue Sky, Only a Bag. We have a Instagram, still. We keep saying we're going to delete it. We have not. Only a Bag Podcast. We have a email address if you have any questions, comments, concerns, onlyabagpodcast@gmail.com, as well as a website, onlyabag.com, that Darcy and I are working pretty hard to put on like more and more articles. So thank you all genuinely so much for all of your help. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for listening and interacting with us. It's so fun.
It is so fun. It makes this really enjoyable, genuinely. So without that, with no more ado is done. We have a dude, it is a did, a done. We are now
done the ado.
We've done the ado. We are moving forward into Matera.
Or the City of Caves, as some call it.
Love that.
So you may have heard of it, you may not have, but it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it was named the European Capital of Culture in 2019.
Which is interesting, if I may, because you and I had visited Italy at least, visited for a couple months at a time, but basically spent about a year between 2015 and 2019 in Italy. Mm-hmm. And despite the fact we're 2 hours away from Matera, had never really heard of Matera.
You're right.
And I think when it was named the thing, with the European Capital of Culture, which it was only for 2019, I think every year there's a different city, and it seems to always be, I looked it up, it always seems to be a kind of a new and upcoming city that doesn't necessarily have a lot, not that it doesn't have a lot going for it, but it doesn't already have a lot of fame and prestige.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, oh, you might not have heard of this city, and it's a way to kind of like build it up. And I think around 2019, 2018, like there was one in Lithuania. And so it's not usually Italy. So it was a big deal for Matera. And we were both like, cool. I don't know what that is. And I think it was our friend who was like, oh no, it's like a city of caves. And we're like, okay, yeah, it's a cave town. Fine. And I don't know, because I think there's like caves around here. Like people do build their house on top of caves. Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, okay, that's interesting, I guess. I mean, we should go see it, I suppose. And it wasn't until we went there that we're like, oh.
It's wild.
Yeah. The whole cave thing old. Really undersells it.
Yes.
Depends, I guess, if you're into caves. I'm into caves. I like caves. I like a good cave. I'm a big fan of the cave. But it's also, if somebody's like, they build on top of caves, I'd be like, okay.
It's also, though, it's helpful to know about Matera, either to see photos of it, which we will be posting on our website and writing articles about Matera. But it's helpful to see photos and or hear the small description I'm going to tell you now, because when you hear like, oh, it's a city of caves, you might think, oh, it's a city and there's some caves there. I don't know. But no. So essentially there's a ravine, and on one side of the ravine, there are tons of caves, and you can see the openings to all of these caves. You can go look in some of them. We'll get into that in a little bit. So there's caves there, and then there's the Sassi, which again we'll get into in a minute, but it's these incredible cave dwellings that people lived in beginning like 7,000 years ago, and then, I mean, even before that, but they were quite developed 7,000 years ago, and then almost continually lived in until quite recently in the 20th century, and obviously renovated and added on to. So it's a massive city of tons and tons of caves and houses made out of caves, and it's really, really wild.
It's also, depending who you ask, I should say, but it's also considered one of the oldest continually inhabited cities on Earth, which is just interesting because, I mean, again, it's continually being sort of a stretched word there, because it, there was times where it wasn't in like, again, as you we're going to talk about in a minute, where it wasn't lived in, and then also people are like, well, there might have been a break there. We don't really know because, there's no one potentially was writing about it 7,000 years ago, but it is a genuinely fascinating history. And to know that it was only 2 hours away, we were both delighted and surprised. Yeah. So of course, I think we came back obviously a couple hours ago. You can tell my brain is scattered. And this is the second time we've been, I think.
Yes.
So we wanted to do a little episode because we're going to be talking about the South, more or less going forward for a little bit, for just a couple episodes. We're going to be talking about Southern Italy, especially as we do get into some of these episodes we're going to be putting out, for those of you who are going to travel this summer, and obviously fall and anytime after this comes out, but specifically this summer, because we realize we've talked a lot about Venice and Siena and Rome and Florence, and we haven't really talked too much about the South. And it does seem like there are more and more articles and interest in Southern Italy, because a lot of people are saying, I like Italy. I love Italy. I've been already once. I'd like to go again, but I don't want to see the same 4 cities. Where do I go? And so a lot of people are looking south because, there's like the entire other half of the country south of Rome that most people don't see.
Plus, we live here.
Which is kind of like the only reason to go anywhere.
So I said that because we want to talk about it, because we're excited about the place where we live.
Yes, that makes way more sense. I was like, yeah, you should totally come to Southern Italy. You could be like, I can go where only a bag lives. That's amazing. So
yeah, if that's the reason you want to come to the South, that's also so a reason. Fun. Okay, so I feel like my first point about Matera is I'm gonna sound a little grumpy. I'm not.
I love it.
I'm not grumpy. I just want to state so that everybody knows, because it can be very confusing when you look up Matera online if you're Googling it. Matera is in Basilicata. Basilicata is
with
how
a
you...
B.
Yes, Basilicata. Basilicata. It is not in Puglia. So often it's written online, when you're traveling to Puglia, pop it on over and see Matera. It's pretty cute. It is an incredible city that should be very much addressed on its own, in my opinion. And also, it's not in Puglia. It's quite close. If you're going to Puglia, absolutely go see Matera. But it's not. It's in a different region. So that's just important to know.
It also used to be the capital of Basilicata until 1803 when it was moved to Potenza. So there's still kind of... It's just one of those weird things, I think, where if you look up like what to do in Puglia, where to visit in Puglia, there's almost always like Matera has an honorable mention, and it's kind of like, it's not in Puglia.
That's what makes me so grumpy. Several people have used that sort of a phrase similar to that. Like, it's an honorable mention from Puglia, and I'm like, it deserves the number 1 award. It gets first place, it's not in Puglia.
And I think Basilicata has a lot of rich history in terms of, part of it is, I'll be honest, there's a lot of cheese history that I'm thinking about. So the sort of...
It has a rich cheese history.
Which does, like the caciocavallo, I think is from Basilicata originally. I think the whatever we had last night, the bufala mozzarella, but the burrata, I believe, is originally from Basilicata. A lot of like moliterno is from Basilicata. So there's a lot of Basilicata cheese. There's a lot of like history specifically in a region that is very little, very not known, even in Italy. There's not a lot known about Basilicata, just because it is one of the poorest, if not poorest, regions in Italy. It's fairly small, and it really has not much going on for it apart from cheese history and Matera and Potenza, which you should never visit because there's literally nothing to do there ever. Do not go to Potenza.
Really throwing some shade on Potenza.
I know, but I think everyone who goes to Potenza are like, don't go. There's nothing to do in Potenza. If you're listening to this from Potenza, I'm sure you agree. Right?
And we, as I think we've mentioned before, we don't own a car, but we would very much like to rent a car and explore around Basilicata more, because it is an insane, the topography, the landscape of Basilicata is just wild. It goes from like Teletubby rolling hills to like a Star Wars looking, what are they called? The stones that come
Calanchi.
up. Calanchi, which you said look a bit like a mesa, which we have in the US.
Exactly. It almost has like a lot of it's this sort of sand. It's more like sandstone, not sand. But when you're driving by, it looks like just giant piles of sand everywhere.
It is wild landscape.
Really, but also where we come from, it's not that y'all care too much, and again, but it's like you're kind of almost like driving through Maine or something. Like it's forests, there's lakes, it's mountainous, and all of a sudden you go through these 2 giant stones that are almost like these like sentinels, and you pass through between them, and all of a sudden it's like it's essentially Basilicata, especially this region around Matera. They filmed a lot of what are called spaghetti westerns, but it's Italian western movies that are done in the American like western style, but they're Italian movies, and they're specifically for an Italian audience, but also I guess sometimes American audiences. But it was, I guess, when Italy didn't have their, you couldn't go fly to the United States to film a movie, a western, so you do it in southern Italy. And it's a very evocative place in terms of imagery, in terms of just, is also, I think, we'll get into a minute, how it's probably better, honestly, if you are going to visit Matera, to rent a car, just in terms of, we've mentioned this before, but in terms of transportation, southern Italy does have a lack of transportation options that the north has, like especially compared to the north. I would almost say though, if you're coming from the United States, especially not from like Boston or New York or California or something that has like a lot of public transportation, it's a little bit like that. Like, I mean, I'm thinking where we're from, there's no way to go see outside of Savannah without a car. You know, you have, it's like, there's no like, oh, I'll take a bus there. It's like, no, you won't. What are you talking about? There's no bus. There's no train there. I think now, and especially since they actually cut the train line, the train between now like Savannah and Atlanta takes like 24 hours because no longer runs there. You have to go up and then come back down, I think, to Washington. So it's a bit of a, I don't know. It's just, I wanted to kind of mention that in terms of you should rent a car if you're going to go to Matera. And if you do, just in terms of this rich landscape, there's also abandoned towns. There's a lot of, like Arabesque influence, because there a couple, at least one major time, there was Bari, and that entire part of Italy was ruled by, like, it was an Islamic empire basically. So it has a lot of influence that you won't really expect, like a lot of Byzantine influence, a lot of things you might not expect from Italy, in terms of, oh, this is the same place with like the rolling hills of Tuscany or the lakes around Lake Como, or, you know, whatever it is. It's just like, it's
and
such
the architecture is quite different too, which is really cool. I mean, there's still quite a lot of, I say still, we live in a medieval town, so there are many medieval towns. Some of them are abandoned. They look amazing. I really want to walk around in them. But also in Matera and some of these other cities, like you're saying, the Arab influence has very much influenced the architecture, and it looks different, completely different than Florence and Venice and Rome.
Yeah.
So
I mean, genuinely, it's fast. Yeah. So if you go to Matera, it's very much going to feel like you're in a different country, I think. Or at least for us, literally driving 2 hours, it's like, wow, this is unlike anything we have anywhere near we are. And we're 2 hours away. Mm-hmm. So just in terms, I mean, I say that as an American, there are other countries in the world that you drive 2 hours and you are in a different country with different influences. So that's not that surprising, I guess.
That's a good point.
You know, I'm thinking like you can drive from like northern France to Spain and it's totally different. Maybe not in 2 hours. I have no idea how long that takes. I'm just using another example. That's like a 7-hour drive. Somebody's listening to this like, this guy's an idiot. So anyway.
So yes, definitely I suggest renting a car, because there is kind of, I shouldn't say kind of, there is a train station in Matera, but the train kind of only goes between Matera and not even Bari. It says to Bari, but it stops in
Altamura.
Mm-hmm, and you have to change trains there.
To Bari.
Bari. So if you can, I highly recommend renting a car and also experiencing the landscape, but be careful while you're driving to not look too much at the landscape, because it can be very distracting.
It can be. It's also, again, Basilicata is, and I don't mean like to throw shade, but the roads there are, again, it's the poorest region in Italy. So there can sometimes be a stark difference in road quality, not necessarily on the Autostrade, which is the federal highway, for lack of a better example, or a better word, which is essentially it's maintained by the government. So it's immaculate. It's just on the sort of state roads and things. I mean, the road that we took to Matera, that you're supposed to take to Matera, it's literally overgrown, like in the sense of,
it's beautiful.
Oh, it's gorgeous. I mean, it is a gorgeous, gorgeous road, but it is bushes coming into the road. So a 2-lane road turns into basically 1 lane. And that way, like when a car comes, you have to kind of both get to the side, pushing the bushes. So
it's covered in wildflowers and then fields, and it's really insane.
It's a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous landscape. But again, it almost feels, I don't know, it's kind of like you're slipping through the looking glass on a certain level. And then you pop back out and you're back in the real world. You're just in Matera and people speak Italian, and it's like there's a Flixbus, and it's like all what you expect in a touristy city, but you're like, oh, where were we for like an hour? So if you have the option to rent a car, there are a lot of parking lots in Matera that are sort of not hidden, but they're not like ugly giant parking lots. They're nicely sort of stuck to the side.
Yeah, they don't stick out in a really gross way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it's easy to rent a car. It's pretty cheap to park, and
we parked at a parking lot that was right in the center of town, and it was $10 a day.
Yeah, so that's, which I don't know what it is in like Rome or something, but that is I think if you're only going for a day or two, that's a reasonable amount, especially because the hotels in Matera are not nearly as expensive as they are in like Florence or Venice or something.
Definitely.
Especially just the same time of year. I'm thinking what we just went, so it's...
And so one thing about hotels, just a quick note, is that you can stay in, we're going to get into what the Sassi is in a little bit. You can stay in the Sassi. You can also stay, obviously, in other... The Saucy is a very old part of town, which is then surrounded by a newer part of town. You can stay in the newer part. It's all around, there are some great places for around 100 euros. Let's say that.
Yes, 100%.
And one, though, expectation I want to set is that while hotels are quite affordable compared to other cities, some restaurants do have, I don't know, like 14 euros a plate.
I would say they have like the traditional, not northern, but like tourism pricing. I mean, it's great food.
It is.
Some of it is really genuinely good food.
And where, if you want to, maybe later we can briefly describe the restaurant that we went to. And it was a little bit on the fancier side, somewhat beautiful plates, traditional food. And they clearly put a lot of care into food that they made, but it was about 14 euros a plate, I would say.
Yeah,
roughly.
I think it was 4 of us plus a bottle of wine. Without the bottle of wine, we each paid about 25 to eat there. With the bottle of wine, well, it was a 20 euro bottle of wine, so that's like 25 a person is essentially, or 30 a person.
Which compared to the US, I feel like especially Savannah is like mind-blowingly cheap, especially for the quality of food and the amount of food that we ate. It was all fresh and local and traditional recipes, and it was amazing.
And plus the bottle of wine is local.
Yes, from Matera. But I think for you and me, coming from the town that we live in, you can get a plate of pasta for like 8 euros, and that's like, wow.
Yes, expensive.
That's expensive.
Yeah. Oh, and you can get a bottle of wine for, 12, or the house
at
wine
the restaurant,
a liter for 8. So it's a little bit like 20. Who do you think you are?
So it's just a consideration, especially if you're budgeting.
Yes. I think that's a great consideration. If you are budgeting, yeah. And there are definitely cheaper places to eat if that's something, if it is a budget concern. We just happened to take a recommendation from somebody and it ended up being a great recommendation
from the bartender.
At a different bar, yeah.
At a different bar, yeah.
Not at the restaurant, to be clear.
Right, yeah.
We didn't go into the restaurant bar.
Right. Would you recommend your restaurant?
Yeah.
No, at the bar. And so also, speaking of the bartender, who was very nice and gave us the dinner suggestion. So we were with somebody who is not Italian. And I think because, you and I aren't Italian, but we've lived here for so long that we've told y'all listeners so many times, dinner time in the South is around 8:30, 9:30, depending on the time of year and where you are exactly. And so we were with someone who is not from Italy, and we were talking about, what time dinner would be. And eventually we ended up asking the bartender, just to make sure, what time is dinner here? And he's like, yeah, about 9 p.m. So that's just for setting your expectations for having dinner in the South. It is late.
And even though the restaurant opens at 7:30, they will be very confused to see you there at 7:30.
Yeah, their pans aren't hot at 7:30.
There's nothing hot. It's just like, we're open technically, but you shouldn't be here.
We did get there, and usually we make a reservation, but the bartender said we didn't need to. And we had to wait a few minutes, but it was totally fine. But it was packed when we got there. So other people did clearly arrive earlier than we got there about 8:30.
We got there about 8:45, 8:30.
Okay, so other people did have an earlier dinner time, but
yeah, that's true.
I feel like 8:39 is a good time to have dinner.
Yeah, which is great. In the summer it's kind of perfect because that's already the sun's down and you've had drinks and you chilled out and you walked around, so it's a perfect time. And are there any other just sort of general little things?
Yeah, so there's 2 that kind of don't fit in anywhere else in this episode. The stones in Matera are incredibly slippery.
Yes, that's a good one.
Inexplicably slippery. I always wear my vintage Doc Martens. I'm not flexing. They're just really great boots. And I almost never slip anywhere. But I was slipping all over the place.
Well, I was going to say, and that's something to keep in mind, both when it is dry. We've talked about this in Rome. When it gets dry and dusty, it can get really slippery in Rome just because the sort of a layer of dust coats everything and it, you can just slip on the stones. And then likewise, when it's raining, it gets super slippery. Thankfully, it did not rain while we were there, but we can easily see during the rain, this would be a nightmare. And then also when it's kind of it hasn't rained for a week or two and it gets kind of dusty, or during the scirocco or something where there's just that sort of dust in the air, it can easily be a bit of a challenge. So maybe pack good walking shoes that you trust, that you feel good about, not necessarily the flip-flops that have the foam bottoms or something like that, or even the Birkenstocks. I have Birkenstocks that have foam as a sole. I wouldn't bring those because I would I wouldn't be able to stand.
Right. Totally agree. The other one suggestion that doesn't really fit anywhere is that there are some public water fountains in Matera and in the historical area, but not very many. And this is particularly important to remember in the summertime because it can get very hot in the city. There aren't a lot of trees.
There are not, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember a single tree in the historical area. So just bring water, buy water, hydrate.
Absolutely. I think it's really smart, especially if you're going in the summer.
Okay, do you want to talk about the saucy?
Let's talk about the saucy. How would you like to start?
Well, it's wild.
Love
Crazy
that.
place. So I'm going to do my best to sort of describe visually what it is.
If I may, actually, though,
Yes.
if you've seen Passion of Christ by Mel Gibson, if you've seen
Mel Gibson?
Well, he directed it. I mean,
Oh, I thought he was in it. I've never seen it.
oh, me either. No, but that's just a famous one.
Okay.
Or we just saw another book of something of Clarence, the Book of Clarence,
I
story
think
of Clarence.
it's the Book of Clarence.
The Book of Clarence. That was a recent movie. There's also, there's an opening couple scenes of No Time to Die, the James Bond movie, as well as a handful of others, have all been filmed in the Saucy in Matera. So if you've seen those movies, you've seen the Saucy in Matera. I'm just throwing that out there as a way of like, oh, I think I actually know what it looks like. If you've seen those movies, you do know what it looks like.
Yeah.
If you have not, Darcy shall give you an explanation now.
So when you enter Matera, or that makes it sound like it's a theme park. When you're standing in Matera, you've just arrived, you've parked your car, you checked into your hotel, and you're walking into where the like a sort of historical center is. There's sort of a band of a main strip where you will find a great gelato place. We'll put that in the description. Lots of shops and restaurants and little bars and things like that. And then beyond that, there are a couple little lookout points and a couple of entrance points. And the city just sort of turns into a crater of like a sea of, I don't know, a pond, a lake, I don't know, of white houses built into caves. But you can't really tell that they're caves when you're looking at it because they have facades that are around like 16th century facades. But it's just this bowl of like beautiful beige rock homes and buildings, and it's just wild.
It's like they're supposed to be like 12 levels, and I don't know, I did not get the feeling looking at it that you can see the 12 levels, but it's essentially one's built on top of and set behind the one below it, and then so there's a very much a sense of
It's like a maze almost. It can seem like just multi-level homes on the top of homes, and really incredible.
I would almost say because there's a lot of Italian towns, anywhere, but built on a hill, and so they kind of fall down the hill, and it's almost like an inverted version of that.
Yes.
Where it's built sort of as in a almost in a crater, as you were saying, like in the sense where it's like, oh, it's like a hill but inverted in the sense that it's just you go down instead of going up. I don't know, and it's maybe a terrible way to explain it, but it's just so like, I don't know, the first time I think we saw it, it was a bit like, wow, that is breathtaking because you don't expect it.
It is.
And then
it's absolutely incredible to look at. It's really, really wild. And so all of these, which were homes and shops and things like that, were inhabited from around 7,000 years ago. And then they were inhabited up until the 1950s and sort of obviously renovated throughout that time. But a lot of the facade, I guess a lot of the outside that you'll see, it doesn't look like you're looking at a bunch of caves because they're around. They have a lot of facades that are kind of 16th century. But if you go inside of them, and there are, in fact, I think there's at least one that's a museum that's kind of set up so you can see how people would have lived. But it's just like caves that go back into the earth once you pass through the doorways, and it's crazy.
Plus a lot of the restaurant we ate at, there's a lot of other restaurants and boutiques and things like that. You can really tell inside because the front of it is like, stone in the sense of it's stone blocks. They call it tufa. It's not tufa. It's limestone, but it has nothing to do with the tufa that you might find in Italy or in France, or volcanic tuff, which is also not what it is. So they just call it tufa, but it's not tufa apparently, which I think is a funny little byline that somebody put in an article somewhere. And no, it's kind of what it's interesting. Once you enter, it's a sort of not to say the facade falls away, but it's very geometric on the outside in terms of it's straight lines. It's like street, it's all straight lines. It's all streets and roofs and this and that. But then once you enter into the houses or the restaurant, it's all smooth. There's all these little carve outs for I have no idea what.
It's properly a cave.
Yes, and it's properly a cave. And no, it's a really beautiful just experience. Just that sort of initial, experience. It's really lovely.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And something that we were talking about off mic is that a little bit like Venice, it can kind of seem like a theme park because there are only limited ways to get into it.
There's limited ways, and actually, if I yes, and I think to expound on that, because there's limited ways to get in. There's only like 5 or 6 entrances, quote unquote, to the Sassi. There's an overwhelming feeling. I mean, because it's old, as you mentioned. And I'll be very, very clear. Like we've talked about this in the Venice episode. This is this in the sense of like Venice can have that sense where like you're kind of supposed to follow this path through. The Sassi has the same thing. They have the touristic itinerary, is what they call it, the tourist itinerary, where they kind of want you to follow this path through, and there's a kind of an overwhelming feeling that it's curated.
Yeah.
And it is, for sure. But, I mean, there's a number of times you step off the path and you see graffiti, and you see bricked up doorways, and you see crates, or you see like, oh, that was a house that's kind of been abandoned, which kind of brings me to the point of what you see in Matera is definitely like a varnished version of potentially what, because you said in the 50s, it was basically an order was given for it to be evacuated due to mostly the sanitary conditions were really no running water. There's no electricity. There's no sewer system. There's pretty much nothing.
And when you see it and you know that, so people were forced to leave because there were unsanitary conditions. Like you said, there was no running water. There was no electricity and no properly working sewage system. So when you're in the Sassi and you think about not having those amenities, you think about like, wow, what would the streets have looked like? What would they have smelled like?
Yeah.
What was life like here? Malaria was a big problem, I think, just because people couldn't, because living in certain conditions like that, and at a certain point, a lot of these people, it seemed, didn't have access to great healthcare or living conditions. Anyway, so malaria was fairly rampant and people were forced to leave. And it was between like the 1950s and finally by the 70s, everybody had left and they were rehoused in new apartment buildings.
And I was going to say, like in the 80s, so the 80s and 90s, it was a bit of, I think the 90s is when they started the regeneration, quote unquote, project. But for a lot of people who lived in Matera in the 80s, they talked about like, yeah, there were some artists trying to do stuff in the Sassi because even during the relocation, I think the 50s specifically, there's a lot of questions over once it came to light. Like, do we relocate people? Do we kick them all out? Do we wall up the Sassi, like pretend it didn't exist kind of thing? Like, do we bury it? Do we destroy it? Like, what do we do?
And it's incredibly sad. I don't want to go into this too much in this episode. I think we'll do
a
another
history one. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's incredibly sad because a lot of people from Matera were made to feel like they should be ashamed.
For sure.
For being from that, from being from that area. And that's really sad. And people were forced to leave. And sometimes it's explained that, oh, they were given these wonderful houses and they had running water and it was great. But I think we can all imagine that if you're forced out of your home, especially because so many of these people had been living there for generations and suddenly they were forced to leave and that's not their home anymore, so says, the government. It's just very, very sad.
It was also just strange because, and a lot of people point this out, because it was like you could have done these regeneration projects while people were there, even if you had to move people temporarily while you put in like this neighborhood gets a sewer system and running water. And then, while you've done it, like slowly piece by piece, they didn't. And now I believe it's a little bit weird because the town owns all the buildings in the Sassi and they decide who goes in there. So it's all boutique hotels and boutique shops and spas. And it's like, oh, and this kind of brings me to that point of it does feel very much like a curated theme park, because while there are some streets that are like, okay, that's not original, but that is that 1980s, 1990s, it's graffiti, it's trashed, it's like just this, there's weeds growing everywhere. It's like, okay, that's probably what it looked like. There's so many other streets that are super, super, super curated. And you almost feel like you're walking through a movie set, which I think can kind of give the impression, again, going back to this Venice thing, where like it's not a real place. And again, going these, a lot of these shops have a free entry and this and that. It's just like, are you in a real city or are you in a just essentially something that only exists for tourism? And where Venice, there are still people who live in Venice. The weird thing is we keep checking just because we don't want to be wrong, but it doesn't look like anybody actually lives in Matera unless you have like
in the Sassi,
unless you have like special permission from the government kind of thing. Because I think they are renting it out, but by and large, it's mostly to like Airbnbs and things like that. It's like for tourism reasons only.
And the thing is that not every structure in the Sassi is livable.
Yes.
A lot of them are still being renovated and made so that they are safe to be inhabited. So I think that just by the nature of when people were forced to leave, and then the amount of time that it takes to clean up that area and make it livable and functional. And now we're in the 21st century where there's Instagram and the internet, and tourism is huge and it's a massive industry. It just happened to be that I think it's the easiest way to make money is to rent places as Airbnbs and hotels and to use them as touristy shops. And it just didn't have the opportunity yet to naturally become really a local neighborhood again,
for sure, which is interesting because Matera itself is, and as you will probably notice if you go, it is a really interesting, beautiful, thriving city. It is just a bit of a bummer that none of it's happening in the historic center of it. It's all happening around it or near it or in different little neighborhoods. And it's, I mean, when I say thriving, I don't mean that in a way of like, we run a podcast, so I have to say thriving, otherwise it looks rude. I mean, no, genuinely, it's like it's one of the fastest growing cities in the South in terms of like population, which is super rare. A lot of the cities in the South, even big cities like Bari and Brindisi and things like that, are being like, even young people are leaving to go north or to go to other parts of Europe because it's just like, who wants to be in the South? There are so many programs to kind of keep people in the South, in terms, not like in a terrible way, just like in a financial way of like, if you want to start a business, we'll give you money. Actually, interestingly, on that note, I think Puglia is one of the few regions that's almost never on this because there are more people want to stay in Puglia and Bari and things like that than in Basilicata. So the fact that they are such a vibrant city is kind of a testament to a lot of it, and just its situation. It's like you do kind of feel like interesting, like you're hidden from the world when you're there because you can't see out, but also it's a bit of a shame because it's just the situation as you talked about, kind of the Sassi sort of falls down into this bowl. Historically, that would have been essentially a protective component of it. Like nobody can see the towns there, and now it's kind of interesting because obviously when I drive up, you can see it, but it is still hidden from a lot of other angles of town. Like you can't see that it's there. So it's a kind of a beautiful, aspect of it, I guess, is that you're in a very unique position and a lot of people seem to recognize that. So it is a vibrant city. It's just unfortunately not in the old town, not in the Sassi.
And two things I do want to say. I just want to clarify when we're saying that a lot of these shops and restaurants are kind of touristy, it doesn't mean that they're not authentic and local. There's a lovely, I'm sure there are lots of lovely shops, but we've passed by a ceramics shop, which it seems to be very much locally made. There's a guy carving stone and selling certain items. There's a woman there who does these cute little knitted hats and scarves and things. So it's not to say that they're like tchotchke shops or like we've talked about before, items made in another country and shipped in for tourists specifically. They do seem to have an emphasis on like artisanal objects and like curating things in a thoughtful way. So I don't want to dissuade you from going and purchasing things there and eating there. It's really very cool.
And some of those restaurants have been around since before 2019, which just shows that like they were there. They're not like not a opportunistic. It's not a post 2019 European capital of culture thing. Right. It's we've been here trying to make this work for like 15 years and now it's starting to really pick up.
So two more things about the Sassi is that Google Maps doesn't work super well in the Sassi.
No,
I don't know technology. I don't know if it's because the signals got not great there or just Google Maps didn't map it super well. I'm not really sure.
There's a lot of levels, I think, too. And there's a lot of things that look like they're on the same level. And you're like, oh, they are not. So I think that's I've noticed that was a big thing because it was like, just go up. And you're like, well, I can't because that's a private staircase up to somebody's balcony that is then connected to the street above. But I can't do that. I have to. Can you tell me another way? Because this is ridiculous. So I would not trust Google Maps in the Sassi. As like one tip, I think.
And on that note, it's quite a lot of up and down. I know we've really heavily explained how this is like a crater, but it's not a lot of flat walking. Once you get down sort of to the bottom, there's a flat-ish path, but it's quite a lot of stairs.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing to keep in mind if you are traveling with kids or somebody who's older, or if you're older, or if you have like bad knees, bad back, bad hips, anything that you're like walking is a pain. Walking up and down things is a bigger pain. Just keep in mind that the Sassi has very few flat level walks that you can enjoy for an extended period of time. There's like some flat areas, but then eventually it's going to be up or down. And once you're down, unfortunately, the only way out is back up, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I mean, I know that's how, like, physics works, I think. Is that physics? I don't know. I didn't go to school.
I know, but every time we do an up and down, especially at the end of the day, I'm thinking, I don't want to go back up to my hotel.
Yeah, and is there another way?
Another option?
There's like some other, is an elevator somewhere hidden?
Can physics just invert?
Yes,
I don't know.
For a minute.
So one thing I want to talk about the walk that we did yesterday. But before we get into that, I just want to make a quick note of the cistern, which is called the...
Like Pulumbaro, Polambaro, Lungo. Polombaro Lungo.
Which is a cistern that served basically all of Matera. And you can now visit it. And it, just to say, it's very cool. If you only have one day in Matera, you don't need to absolutely see it. But it is very cool.
And the reason we went, actually, I will say, is because we've heard a lot about this cistern. Some people have referred to it as an underground cathedral. So we were very curious. We really want to check it out because especially I think maybe even the Wikipedia site says you can, navigate the water by boat. And I was like, oh, it's massive. And it is. And
it's huge for a cistern.
Yes.
It's not huge for a cathedral.
Yes. It's also, it's fascinating. And it's not, as you mentioned, it's basically if you have some time and you want to check it out, or it's the summer and you want to go somewhere that's a little bit cool temperature wise, not cool, like that's a chill place, then it's definitely worth checking out. It's €3 a person, kids go in for free. But if you are like on limited time and you're like, we want to see what's the coolest things in Matera, we are only here for a day, I think it's safe to say that you could skip it and still get an idea of what it is if you go into some of the churches or maybe even some of the houses or some of the museums or something like that has that. Honestly, even some of the restaurants have that sort of like, but I mean, it's a very cool spot and they have a metal catwalk type thing. So you can
it's like a metal staircase and a catwalk. So that you're walking above, there is still water in it, but they've drained it to a certain level where you can get a sense of obviously water being there, but it's not going to like touch your feet or anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is quite a lot of stairs. You go down and then there's a catwalk and you go back up at the other end. And it's cool because maybe we'll talk about this more in the history episode, but people would use obviously like tin buckets from a well in that piazza to gather their water. And after the cistern wasn't used anymore for a while, some buckets stayed down there. So you can see how when the water level rose, the buckets made rust rings on the ceiling in certain spots. And I just thought that was so cool.
It's interesting too, because it seems for a lot of people who lived in Matera at the time, because it was rediscovered in 91 and last used in 1923, I think. People had pretty much forgotten it was there.
Yeah.
Like there was a cave in and no one was hurt. It was like a flower bed caved in. And then they sent like first little explorers and then they sent scuba divers. And that's where the boat thing came in. Apparently they were using a boat to navigate it, to try to figure out what was down there.
Like a little dinghy.
Like a little dinghy. Thing. Yeah. But people who lived there like forgot it was there, which I think is fascinating because it's a huge structure to forget is under your town.
Absolutely. And one last thing is that I don't want to freak anybody out, but just to be aware, it is one way in, one way out, and it's a narrow staircase up and down. I started to get a little panicky because people stopped where they weren't supposed to, so it was clogging up the staircase and we couldn't move for a moment. It's nothing like spelunking. You don't have to crawl through any small spaces.
Darcy hates spelunking.
I would never go spelunking. If that vibes with you, more power to you. I love it. For you. Not for me.
If we see a cave, Darcy's like, I can stand outside. I get the sense it's a cave. No, I see it. It's a cave. I get it.
I do get a little claustrophobic sometimes. So I was totally fine. I had a little tiny just stress on the inside. I didn't freak out on the outside. But it's just something to note that if you get claustrophobic or have problems with closed or tight spaces,
I don't recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It's also, just to be clear, you said one way in, one way out. It's one way in, same one way out.
Yes.
Not like one other different way out.
Yes. You go in and then you turn back around and you come the same way.
So it's a bit like tight on the crosswalk. And then again, as you mentioned, people are on the stairs stopping, which there were. You're all just on stairs. All of a sudden, you're very aware of the fact that you're underground on stairs, not moving. And you're really hoping the stairs can really hold everybody up. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And the walk, is that the next section?
Yeah.
The reason I think, for those of you wondering, the walk, what's this walk thing? If I may just, I don't know what you have as a notes, because you took the notes today. No, I just wanted to preempt. It's kind of the other big thing to do in Matera. Is a way of.
If you're checking things off like a touristy list, it's something that people recommend doing.
And I think going back to this Polambro,
Arambaro lungo.
Thank you.
I don't have that written down.
There's like M's in there, and I'm like, where do the M's go? It's ridiculous. I mean, me in this language, not the language. Language makes perfect sense. I'm just like putting a lot of letters in sometimes that they don't belong, and people are like, that's not how that's pronounced. And so the walk thing that's mentioned is essentially I walk to the other side of what's called La Gravina, which is the ravine separating Matera from also what was once, and still is Matera technically, but was another inhabited part of Matera. And it's something that a lot of people do, and if you have time, it is worth it. But as we will get into, they require some preparation, I think. Mm-hmm. It's not for everybody, and it requires some preparation.
Mm-hmm. I do want to say first, so this walk/hike, it very much is a hike, is to the troglodyte cave dwellings. That might be redundant, but the cave dwellings where people lived 7,000 years ago and more. They are really cool. You can see them across the ravine from Matera proper. So if you are not into walking and hiking, you can get a lovely view and a sense of them from looking across the ravine. Absolutely, you're not missing anything if you're not into hiking. You are
definitely missing something, but it's fine, I think.
But if you're not into hiking, it's not worth it.
Oh yeah. No, but it's like if you're not into hiking, you're not missing anything on Everest. And like you are,
yes. But, in that sense, yes. I'm not missing anything on Everest because I don't want to hike Everest. It's not worth it for me. I want to look at it and say hello.
You've seen the pictures. You get it. You're like, I get it. It's a nice view.
It's incredible. I don't need to participate in it.
I like to breathe where I am. I get that, yeah.
So the other thing is that you can drive to essentially the top of this, but I don't know, it's not a mountain, but you cliff, yeah. So you can drive and park and then walk down to the caves.
And that walk is much easier.
Yes.
It's a lot more traversed, but I think it's also a little more established in terms of, it's just not as crazy as we're going to get into in a second.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah. Definitely. So if you do want to do this hike, and let me emphasize it is a hike, you enter it from a parking lot, and maybe we can link like a Google Map pin so people can find that parking lot because it's unassuming. And then it's just a staircase down, and eventually you get to an area where it's a tiny trail along the side of the ravine down to a rope bridge. So when we had never walked this trail before the last time we were in Matera, but we did yesterday.
We saw a ton of people doing it though, which is one of the reasons we wanted to go back and do it. Is like we really would like to see what Matera looks like from the other side. Plus, the entire sky this is not that important, but it's filled with falcons. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting, like I don't know, it's an interesting thing. Like there's a gorge, there's falcons.
If you're into nature,
yes.
I highly recommend this. It's incredible.
And it's kind of like, what does Matera look like from the other side? Because again, they were both lived in at, I think, simultaneously. And so, but one side was clearly chosen over the other side. So there's a kind of a natural curiosity, like why, especially because, and this is just me being, the sort of, I don't know, I like light, but it's like the other side gets all the light. Matera loses light quite early in the day because the sun typically sets behind it. So, in the afternoon, you're that's it. Matera's in the shade. But the other side, it's light to the end of the day. So it's kind of like, again, in the summer it makes perfect sense. In the winter, it's like, that's ridiculous. I would never live there. So
yeah, agreed.
We really wanted to check this out because it was like, okay, this is clearly something special happening on the other side. What is it? Mm-hmm. And then we thought the only way there was a walk.
We thought their only way was a walk?
The only way there was a walk.
Right. So we embark on this journey down these little, what are they called? Dirt paths. And it looked like the trail kind of split off. And one direction, which we ended up taking and highly recommend, it looks like it's long, which kind of makes it look more daunting. But people, almost every other person who was on the trail yesterday, and there were a lot of people, were using what looked more like I don't even know if it ever was a trail. It's just kind of a sheer runoff situation that looked completely unsafe, full of loose stone, and was just almost like a 90-degree angle. Like, I don't know how the people that walked that.
If I also may, two things to add is, or maybe preempt it with, is one, it is an established path. It has a little expert rating from the National Park of Murja, I'm trying to like say an American accent than Italian. And so it's essentially they're saying it's an expert rating, bring shoes and water and like, I don't know, call this number if you get lost kind of thing. And the reason I say that is because it is better to think of this path as a hike that is nowhere near Matera rather than a path that is still inside the township of Matera. Because I think a lot of people, as we're going to get into a second, were bringing kids and they were kind of very unprepared and they were just not in proper footwear or one of 100 of the little things. And it was like, oh, and you and I were the same. We happen to have boots on because we're like, okay, we're going to take a bit of a walk. We should probably have good walking boots. And from above, you would think it's a pretty established, because again, as you mentioned, it starts in a parking lot. There are stairs. So you're like, this is probably pretty established.
And you can see there's a rope bridge
and across the
ravine,
rope bridge.
and it looks very nice. I mean, it is very nice. It's very safe. But it is deceptively tricky, the trail.
It is. And I think that's the thing is the other thing is like on that note of, so it's not necessarily a path maintained by the town of Matera, but it seems to be maintained by, and it might be, but it seems to be maintained more by this like sort of park thing because of all their
like
signage.
The National Park Service sort of thing, yeah.
And it kind of feels like in 2019 or 2020, they did put some effort into it because some of it, there are like stairs carved into some of the rocks, and they did that little thing where they put like slats of wood as like as stairs if it's down too steep and something like that. But a lot of it has since either disappeared or broken or fallen apart because there's some where you're like, oh, there must have been stairs here because there's a trail and then it ends and then it starts again 4 feet below me and you're supposed to figure out how to get down there. And the other thing is, as you mentioned, like you were trying to figure like this sheer face, there's no controller, maybe there's no controllato, non è controllato.
There's no one like controlling the space,
yeah, it's not a I guess it's like there's no one stopping you from just walking through wherever you want to walk.
Right.
There's
you could just roll down the hill if you wanted to.
Exactly.
It's very dangerous. Don't do that.
Don't do that, yeah.
But there's no one, there's not like park rangers telling you what's safe and what's not and giving you a hand down the stairs or telling you which way to go. It is wilderness outside of the city.
And there's a sign that says, don't go swimming in the water, don't throw trash, don't do this, don't do that, blah, 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 blah. But it's still like it's a lot of personal responsibility, if that makes sense. It's a little bit like on you to, if you want to march in your own direction, good luck, go for it. No one's going to stop you. People might be like, what is that person doing? But no one's going to stop you. And I only mention that because, again, it seemed like there was that sort of desire path thing being created where people are like, well, I don't want to go way over there to go way back. I'm just going to go straight down here. And I think over time, people started to think that was the actual and only path down to the bridge.
And it was, I'm not throwing shade at all. I'm not a hiker. I never thought I would hike as much as I do here. It's just that here where we live, there happen to be mountains
here
around.
in this part of your life, because you mentioned that on the mountain. You're like, I didn't think I'd hike this much as an adult.
I know. As I'm huffing and puffing.
Yeah, like this is much more of a thing than I thought it would be.
I'm a surface level? No, I'm a sea level girly.
I love that. Flat, and you can breathe easily.
Yes, but I happen to have hiked much more in my life than I thought I would. So I felt reasonably prepared even to like kind of assess the trail and make choices on my ability and just kind of suss out what I thought I could do and where was safest. But it seemed like a lot of the people who were taking this desire path, sheer rock face situation were people who were unprepared for the hike. It was a lot of people very much in like cute city clothes, in little cute tennis shoes.
Yeah.
And
100%.
who probably saw, oh my gosh, go do this really cute walk on the internet, and were not, the information they got did not prepare them well for the situation
100%.
they got into.
I also really appreciated when people turned around, because there's a few different sections, areas, or even just like that point right there. That's the point in which you should probably turn around if you're not prepared. And there's a couple of those points, and I appreciate when people did, because there was kind of like that thing where, again, there's no park ranger, there's nothing like that. Like if you get an emergency, you have to find somebody near you or call the emergency line.
Yeah, know your limits. That is so important. And it's
Absolutely.
okay if you have to turn around. It's okay if this isn't right for you. It's more important that you keep yourself safe than push yourself.
And actually, on that note, very quickly, I just want to mention, like, we went with my mom and her friend on this trip. It was a very fun impromptu trip. And at various points, they both stopped and they're like, yeah, that was fun. I'm done. That was good. Thank you. That was plenty. I'm going to turn back now because, you still have the other half of the walk to do just going back to where you came from. And I think one of the reasons that we continued, it was also stupid cold and ridiculously
and
windy.
insanely. I mean, there was a point where I was thought like, I shouldn't step very close to the edge. The wind's gonna knock me off into the ravine.
Well, and some of those were very like, you're on a path that's only about 1.5 feet wide, so
Yes.
it's got a
If
sheer
that.
drop on one
Yeah.
side, and you're hugging the rock on the other side. And no, I mentioned that too because that is just an example of like, yes, if like and you and I really only went all the way partly because we have this podcast, and I mean, we were just like, we want to have enough information about this to tell people without being like, well, we don't really know what it looks like at the end, but here's how the walk there was. And, so I think we had I think an actual reason we went all the way to the end, but I'm curious, had we just explored on our own, I think we probably would have just continued, but I think because we have this podcast and we wanted to share it with y'all, then it gave us an actual reason to do it. But I say this in the sense that if it's cold, if it's windy, if it's hot, if you're just dying of heat or the cold, something like that, it's not like an easy walk through the countryside that you're giving up on. It is again, expert rated hike that they do recommend preparation. It does take an hour to get from Matera, from the starting point to the other side, and then an hour to get back. So if you're
not longer. I think it took us a little bit longer.
So if you are underprepared, then it's not like, oh, you're underprepared for like a walk through, I don't know, like the Borghese Gardens in Rome. It's like,
Right.
it's you're underprepared for a walk in the desert, which is
Yes.
essentially what the area around Matera looks like. It's quite desert-like in its lack of anything resembling moisture and shade.
Yes, which is very important to remember in the summer.
Yes.
So definitely wear boots and bring water.
Or hiking shoes, if you have hiking shoes instead of hiking
thank you.
boots. But yeah,
I think of hiking shoes as boots.
I
You're
love
right.
that.
Well, I'm thinking also boots because we were fine because where we were walking, a lot of the high grass was in the shade, but it is
winter.
possible, and winter, but it is possible that at other times of the year there might be snakes around. So
Yes, that's actually a good point. If you have something a little bit higher up on your ankles, definitely bring those.
So just top 2 tips for that. It is very slippery, so be very careful. Between some of the places that are stone and just the dirt and sort of gravel path, it can be very slippery. We saw a lot of people with young kids on this hike, and I don't know how these little kids did it. I mean, I applaud them, but there were, a lot of kids who were toddlers and 5 and 6-year-olds who were doing this, and I suggest not taking your kids on on this hike unless you hike with your kids a lot.
Yes.
And they're used to it. They know what they're doing. We saw several little kids crying, which I'm not laughing at them. I would be crying too. I just have to cry. I just have to laugh because it's boring for little kids.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just imagining their thoughts going, why are we here? This is not fun. I am thirsty and I'm tired and my tiny little legs hurt.
Yeah, no, exactly. And we're over here to see a hole, and there's a hole over on the other side. We saw plenty of holes on the other side. We're coming to see other holes. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I think there's that aspect. You mentioned too, it's slippery. I also just want to throw out there, we went when it was very dry, which again, slippery, it was dusty, but some of the parts were again, very slippery stone or would just be straight mud. And they do close down the path. There's a gate before you can get the very entrance to the path has a gate. So it kind of gives the impression that they do close the path at some point. Mm-hmm. I imagine it's weather related, or if they think there might be mudslides or something like that. But in case they don't have it closed, in case it rained recently or it's raining that day, just keep in mind that it's not a quaint, dainty sort of path through because again, it looks like a beautiful path through the meadows. It looks like a very easy walk. You're going through grass. I'm like, it is my hills are alive with the sound of music moment. And it was not, if I may.
The hills were alive.
Yes.
And
with the sound of panting.
Yes.
And
exactly.
it's also, I think we'd rather you all listen to this episode, be way over prepared and just knock it out of the park when you go.
Yes.
And be like, that was nothing. Then us say, it was a nice, it's a little bit difficult, but it was a nice walk. And then you get there and you're like, these people are the worst. I thought it was going to be an easy walk. This is the worst experience I've ever had.
Yes.
So I just want to throw that out there.
So some of the positive points are that whenever you get sort of to the bottom of the ravine, there's a river that runs through the center, and the path that we walked, which is actually marked. So just like it's just trail markers, it's the white and red sort of painted flag looking thing. Definitely look out for those and follow that path because that is more established. So we followed those and we got down to the bottom, and there's a little place where you can kind of walk off the edge and sit on this rock. And we were just silent watching the little like, are they chickadees? I don't know what they are.
I think they are swifts.
Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking of them in my mind, and they don't look like a chickadee at all. They were just flying around. I mean, like, what did your mom said they look like in
TIE
Star
fighters
Wars?
from Star Wars.
Just swooping around this river and into the bushes and all around, and it was incredible.
It is, and then even when you get to the other side, because the obviously the big draw is on the other side, there are a bunch of less touched caves in terms of nobody put a house and like a TV and like a matrimonial size bed, or they're called queen size bed. I'm like, what do we call that in the States?
They're called matrimonial here.
In these in the caves, because I feel like all the Airbnbs kind of like really updated, and so a big draw. There are some sort of cave churches over there. There are a number of caves that are just somewhat established, somewhat unestablished in terms of just, you can kind of see like, oh, this is probably what it looked like before. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of, again, I reiterate this, there's a lot of freedom when it comes to walking around over there. You and I noticed that too. There's a lot of, if you want to go to that rock hole thing, just don't fall on the way up there. If you want to go to that one, if you want to go here, if you want to walk there, it's kind of like, as long as you aren't destroying anything and as long as you aren't in the water, there really didn't seem making sure I'm pronouncing this word right. Then it doesn't really seem there's many rules, and it's something that we have talked a lot about Italy. It's just coming from the States, it feels like, even when I hiked, I guess there were no rules either. You're just on the Appalachian Trail, whatever. I didn't actually hike the Appalachian Trail, but for 2 hours, we're going to walk that way and we're going to come back. It's kind of the same thing, but even that felt really established in terms of like, there's a lot of things and there's a little structure of the building you can stay in the night, and then there's people on the trail, and it was more like, oh, there's something happening here. And then this kind of just felt like, if you just want to do whatever you want to do, go for it. And I don't know, I just want to, again, I keep reiterating that because I think a lot of, even as we talk about southern Italy, is going to be like this sort of, someone had an idea once to put a trail there. That was 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. Nobody has touched the trail since then. So it does exist technically, but think of it more like, not a trail so much as it's just a path that may or may not still exist.
Yeah.
If that's,
And it's really cool because you can just wander around as long as, take care of your personal safety. But it is just wild that you can just climb around in and around these caves that people lived in 7,000 years ago with almost complete freedom, really. It's exactly. Incredible.
Don't go breaking into people's houses, but yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, I think that's a big part.
And so we went in, so this is April? So in the springtime, there are just crazy wildflowers as well.
Yeah.
I was walking along the trail and talking about the flowers at a certain point, and then it goes, are you naming flower colors? Yes. In a loving way. And I was, because there's so many cool flowers.
Yellow and blue and purple and lilac and purple.
And caterpillars and snails and all kinds of crazy stuff. It was really cool.
It was kind of like almost like one of those children's books where they take, they have like the painting of the thing, and you have like the 800 things that are existing in the photo, and you're like, this is a caterpillar, this is this is that. I don't know. That's what it felt like.
So it was really, really special. It was a pain in the behind. My knee hurts now. I know I've told you all a million times, I'm 5'4", so I consider
and 29
myself
years
short.
old. I just missed the knee hurting thing.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Hopefully it's not like a lifetime problem, but I'm sure it will be. But anyways, the point is that I'm short. So look at some of these steps and stones that I had to cross were like 2.5 feet tall. So they're like past my knee. And then I'm not clumsy, but I'm not that agile. So it's easier and safer for me sometimes to just squat and then sit down and then kind of scoot down some rock faces. So it was a lot of work for me, and now I'm tired.
I feel that.
But it was really, really special.
And it is very much worth it. I realize we both sound, I think, probably very tired, but it is very much worth it if you are in the South and if you do have a chance to rent a car. Even if you're in Naples and you have a chance to rent a car, it's not necessarily that direct to get there, but you can take like the federal highway, so it's quite direct in terms of getting into Matera. You can get there, but it's very much worth it. But as a last note, before we sign off from this podcast, do you want to talk about the there's some food things?
Yeah, I think we can quickly go through food, because I say quickly as a note for us, because y'all know we can go on and on about food. So we've already established that dinner time is around 8:30, 9 in Matera. And
9:30 if you want to be proper, but that, yeah, whatever.
and in most of the South. The other thing is that we've said this before, but in Italy, when you sit down for dinner, that's your table for the night. You don't have to stay there, but dinner time is it's a long process. So no one's going to rush you out. You don't need to feel rushed. You just chill out and have a lovely dinner.
It's also why it's not uncommon, if I may, for you, if you get to a restaurant that's packed, for them to say, I'm sorry, we have no more space tonight. And you're like, we can wait. And they're like, for like till we close? Like, I don't know what you mean. And I think the only reason that, and I'm not trying to throw shade either, but I think the only reason that last night they're like, if you want to wait a couple minutes, we're not sure, is because there was a giant table of Americans that had already finished eating. It was only 8:30. And they're like, I think they're leaving soon if you guys want, like.
It's interesting. I'd like to know more about this restaurant. So it was recommended to us by the bartender, which sometimes we'll
of
get
a different bar.
Yes, of a different bar.
Just want to be very clear on this.
Sometimes, obviously, I'm wary of places that are recommended, not by locals, but by people in it's just like it could be not a scam, but like, oh, you're recommending your friend's restaurant. Oh, you're recommending your friend's
hilariously,
hotel.
he was recommending his friend's restaurant.
I know, but it turned out to be wonderful, and I'd like to know more about it because now it seems like very authentic food. Now that we've looked up some traditional recipes from the area, they did their own take in a way on very authentic food, and conversely, it seemed to have a lot of Americans eating there. We had seen very few people speaking English, especially with an American accent, all day until we got to that restaurant, and then there was a very large table of artists, an artist group who were there. The table behind us were Americans, and the table to the left of us were Americans. So it's just interesting to me that the food seemed so authentic and so Matera, but also it was quite popular with American people.
Which also, I mean, it could be one of those things where people are like, if you want really good, authentic food, it's where you go. It also, I think it would have been a place potentially you and I would have walked past had not given the recommendation, only because it was like too perfect. It was right on the edge of the Sassi. It was in a cave. It had, like, in the summer, it would probably be an amazing view because the sun goes down a little later. It was pretty reasonably priced for how beautiful the plating was. Again, in terms of like, I think you were talking about 14 or so for some of these dishes. You had a plate of pasta. I can't even remember. It was like a bread soup. I don't even know what that was. It was amazing.
Had a wild,
it's
traditional
like,
thing.
yeah, you feel like you have to. It was like some sort of stale bread recipe thing. I was like, that sounds great.
Stale bread and broth and a poached egg and broccoli and yeah.
I was like, go for it. That's awesome. That sounds. Well, I'll do that. But it was interesting because of not only the plating, but again the quality and quantity seemed genuinely like good, rather than like, I mean, even like you had the cavatelli, and it wasn't white cavatelli. It wasn't like, oh, they used sort of it almost was like whole grain or something, because it was quite brown basically. It wasn't, because a lot of times you get the cavatelli and it's like, oh, it's a little yellow or a little like a little white, and it's like, oh, they use like really refined flour. So this felt like, no, you guys used really quality flour potentially.
And it had local kruski on top, which are dried peppers, which I love, and the wine was local. And it was funny, we decided on a wine, changed our minds, and then the waiter was like, okay, maybe you should probably go with this one. We were like, amazing, that was our first choice anyway, thank you.
Which actually, if I may, brings us to one of the tips is in the north, in a touristy restaurant. I'm gonna limit this generalization to in a touristy restaurant. If somebody were to recommend something to us, I would almost always think it's an upsell. And in the South, though, and this is a broad generalization for the South, I want to be very clear.
But it's happened like 3 times recently to us.
It's happened, yeah, and yeah, exactly. And it's been that we order something. And even like last night, like I think it was my mom ordered wine. She's like, yeah, I want to try like a rosato, a rosé. If we were in France, and he just kind of looked. He's like, oh, no, how about this other one instead? Because you don't want that one. And it was like,
but you could see on his face, he's like, I don't want to tell you that you're wrong. But
yeah,
maybe try this one.
But even the same night, different guy with the desserts. All the desserts are the same price, and so he's running the dessert menu, but he's like, really? He's like, we have like 7 desserts, but we have 2 desserts that you want to try. We have this one and this one. And he's like, we also have this like cheesecake. He's like, we have this other thing. He's like, we have like they're all made in house. So he's like, they're all made in house. If you want something, that we have like gelato or this, he's like, well, I'll make it there. But like, and I think one of the ones he recommended was a cannoli. And we're all like, a cannoli? Come on. We're not in Sicily. We're in Basilicata. And he's like, no. I know. Trust me. He's like, we got the shells from Sicily. We trust me, I know. And he's like, but we did it all proper. And he's like, I promise.
And the whole inside is made there, and it's like inventive and cool, and like local ingredients, and it was really, really cool. And so there had been another instance, not in Matera, somewhere else, where I think with wine, we'd chosen a bottle of wine, and then the owner of the restaurant comes over and he's like, okay, can I make a recommendation? Would you like to try this one? He's like, it's not on the menu. It's my friend's production. And we were all like, it's your friend's production. It's going to be twice the price. It's not going to be as good. We didn't say that, of course, but we tried it and it was incredible. And it was the same price as the other bottle. So it just seems like so many times recently people have recommended something that to my jaded self sounds like an upsell, but really they're being so genuine and they just want you to have the best thing that they have available that they really enjoy.
And they also understand that like stuff on the menu might not be the best thing, which I really appreciate, because I think even anybody who's worked at a restaurant will know that like there's some things on the menu that are okay. They're not great, but they're okay. And there's some things in the menu like that's amazing. Like if somebody's like, what do I want to try? You want to try this thing. And I think that's kind of, and going back to, I think at the beginning of this episode, I mentioned, maybe I didn't, maybe I completely forgot. Again, I'm quite tired. That Matera is still quite new, and the south of Italy is still quite new with tourism. Maybe like the Amalfi Coast and Sorrento and stuff like that aren't Capri. But Matera, I think, is really in its infancy of understanding tourism and how it works in a sense of like, I mean, as we're going to get into in just a second, how it works with what the tourists are expecting. And I think one of the thing is that there's just people in the south tend to be a lot more excited to share their culture than people in the north. I think mainly because people in the south don't get the chance to share their culture as much than people in the north who get the chance to share it constantly and are just kind of over it. And not over it, but like yeah, we get it.
It's a lot, yeah.
And I think part of it too is, I know this is getting into the things like, the north does export a lot of the things they create, so it's like you don't, the best wines might not be served in the house because it might be, it's a much higher price somewhere else. But here it's kind of like, no, why would we export that? That's good. We want to drink it. We could sell it. We could drink it too. So I think there's like a level of people are just so excited to share what makes Matera in this case special, or just any region super special. And so I think something we will repeat as we talk about the South is, while I think the North is big on the destination, the South is big on the experience.
Absolutely.
Which I think is going to be, and even on our articles, we're going to kind of repeat this. It's just because I think there's no real things in the South. Like, go to this place in the South. Even the Amalfi Coast is, a destination, but it's more the experience of being on the Amalfi Coast or Sorrento or Naples. There's no one thing in Naples you should do. You should go to Naples and spend 24 hours there in any part of Naples, and you're going to have such an experience, or outside of Naples. But I don't know. I think in the North, it's like, or even Rome, it's just like, no, there's things you should do. Of course, you should see the Colosseum or whatever. But back to restaurants specifically, you have this other lovely tip.
Oh, I think one of the only things is, we're talking about people recommending things like off the menu. Sometimes there will not be a menu. Yes. Sometimes they will just come over and tell you what's happening or what they have that evening, especially with desserts. There might not be a menu. They'll just tell you. So you might need some Italian in order to understand that. However, lots of people who are in, front-facing restaurant workers and things like that, so many people spoke English, which really surprised me in Matera. I'm not going to go into what we had for lunch, but we ate at a lovely place, which seemed very local. Like, it was, there was a student there that we met, and she was incredible, and she was just going to school, and this is where she eats lunch, which I'm like, nice, we found the local place. And it was really, really great. But the owner of that restaurant spoke English. Just about everybody we interacted with at the restaurant last night spoke English. The bartender at the other bar spoke English. So if that is a worry for you, a remarkable amount of people in Matera speak English.
And a lot of them are not young in the sense, but young and more worldly than you might find, I would say, in like other parts of Southern Italy. It's just in the sense of like speaking English in other parts of Southern Italy is not that common. So Matera, going back to that thing of it's a vibrant young city that's trying to reinvent itself, which is difficult after 7,000 years, I think speaking English is being kind of like, we're a bit, metropolitan, we're a bit international.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think my last tip goes back to thinking about this as an experience. Like, your travel destination is the experience you're going to have. It's the taking things slow and just being there. So we've said that whenever you sit down for dinner, that's your table for the night if you want to stay there. Restaurant service is very, very slow compared to the US. I'm not sure how it is in other countries, but it's very slow compared to the US. There is typically, after you order, there's like a 20-minute break of them preparing your dinner or your first course. And then there's another break. There's a break in between each course. So it can take a long time. So I highly encourage you to be patient and just go with the flow.
There's also, I think, to add on to that, there is once you're sat down, there can often be a 10 to 15 minute wait before anybody comes over. And that's, again, it's based off an assumption, I will say, that you need time. Mm-hmm. It's not based off of I think it's easy to assume that, this is really backed up or it's really slow, but it isn't. It's based off the assumption that a lot of Italians do want time, both to look at the menu, argue about what they're going to get, who's going to split what are we going to share, what's for the table, what's for individuals, what about this, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned in another episode, it's common to order everything all at once, not like, I say that too, it makes sense. That's how restaurants work. You have an appetizer and this and that. But because you're ordering multiple courses, there's a little bit of negotiation to be like, well, do we want this antipasto to actually come out as a contorno because, blah, blah, blah. And so it can kind of be...
Yeah, it's like, who's getting a primo? Who's getting a secondo? Oh, we want an antipasto for the table. Okay. Who's on wine? Does white wine go with your meal? There's a lot of negotiating.
Plus the water. And there's always and sometimes, some places will come by with some water, but not usually until they ask if you want it bubbly or still. So they aren't even going to come by until they can take your order. Because some people don't order water for the table. They just do the wine for the table. Mm-hmm. So it's not uncommon to wait 10 or 15 minutes just to order. And then we waited about 20 minutes or so, maybe a little longer, for the antipasta. Then when we finished the antipasta, we had another 20, 25 minutes.
Antipasto.
Well, it was two of them. Antipasti. Excuse me,
Sorry,
everyone. I'm learning Italian as we're doing this. And so the antipasti, we waited for antipasti. So this is
the word has lost all meaning.
It has completely lost its meaning. And then we waited for essentially the primi secondi. We got, some of us got primi, some of us got secondi, and then after that was the dolci, and even that took another 10, 15 minutes. But it was, I think we spent 2.5 hours there altogether. 8:30 to about 11 is when we left, and we left quite soon after finishing the dessert. So this is all just to say it's part of the experience. However, if you want a fun little insider tip, one of the things we've learned that actually works really well is if you go to Google Maps or anything with reviews and you look at the reviews, if the reviews tend to be great food, terrible service, then it's probably a great restaurant, because a lot of times people writing those reviews are not Italian. And the sort of the Southern Italian snarky person in me is like, what do you know about good food? But anytime I see terrible service, I'm like, that's where we should be eating. The place where it's like the long, oh my God, it took 30 minutes to get our food. It's like, yes, because it's also, it's again a bit of a joke, but not really, because a lot of times Italians will, in between the antipasto and the primi, they will, primo, if you will, they will go smoke.
Yeah.
Or between the primi and the secondi, they'll go smoke. So it's not uncommon for an entire table to get up and leave after some food, and you're like, they're gone. And then, no, they're still outside smoking, and they'll come back in. And even if they don't smoke, it's just what you do. It's like, we need to stand up. We just need to move. We need to digest a bit.
I love that they give you time to have conversations in between your meals, because I think it's very Italian it's not very Italian to not talk while you're eating, but it's so often seen that if you're having really good food, there's a silence that falls over the table while everybody's enjoying their food, and then the food is finished, and then it's a uproarious chit chat, and then you go outside to smoke, and then you come back and you talk, and then eventually the next course comes, and then you get some more wine, and it's just a whole experience.
And inevitably, if you're with Italians for some reason eating, it's like between the primo and the maybe the primo secondo, maybe the antipasto and the primi, there's a swapping of where people are sitting. I don't understand it, but sometimes we're with other Italians and it's like we're sitting, we're comfortable, and then somebody gets up and somebody else gets up and they come down, they swap, and somebody else swaps, and it's like, oh, we should change up who we're talking to. And I'm like,
there are so many chaotic nuances that I have not grasped yet.
Yes, because I'm like, is it do I bore you? I can understand that. Or is it just but then it's you'll see with other people and they're just like, oh yeah, because somebody will come back and they'll have a conversation with somebody that they weren't sitting next to, and then it becomes this whole thing, and it's a very much a living organism, a dinner party in Italy. And on a last note, I will just kind of wanted to mention, as a thing of, in the States specifically, the server, the waiter is often coming by and asking, can I get you anything? Do you need anything? That is never going to happen in Italy. So if you do need something, you can politely hail the server and explain what you need, and they'll get it for you. But you'll never see them unless you're asking for them or unless they're dropping off food, but they will never come by and ask you, because that's not
That's not Italian. That's considered interrupting
Yeah,
en route. They want you to have
exactly.
your conversation and enjoy dinner. Yeah, they're not there to cater on you hand and foot. They're
And
taking your order and bringing your food.
And I think on that, that's also a sign if they are coming over constantly, that's a sign that maybe they're doing it because they see you as tourists or it's a touristy restaurant, because it's very, very uncommon in any restaurant that's like Italian, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that's everything.
I think that's all for today from Matera.
I know we have out-talked and overspoken or something.
And I'm going to have some dinner and go to sleep now.
That sounds about right. And I think this is everything. I mean, this has basically been you should go to Matera if you can rent a car, and if you're in the southern Italy, it is absolutely well worth it. If we're like giving Michelin star ratings, it'd be 3 stars. Like, it's worth the drive there. It's worth specifically taking out the car to go to Matera. So if you're going to Bari, if you're going to Puglia, again, I say Naples, it's a bit farther away from Naples, and maybe isn't a day trip, but certainly a one night overnight trip to Naples, to Matera.
And I do have to say, I think a lot of people suggest it as a day trip, but if you can make it work for you, I would stay overnight, because I find it so much nicer to have a more relaxed day, have some drinks if you drink, have dinner there, and then have a nice sleep, rather than feeling rushed. Especially because you do have to drive sort of winding roads, and you probably don't want to do that in the dark. So
It's like there are no straight roads to Matera. It's all windy roads.
that should be a saying.
I know.
We'll
kinda-
workshop that.
I love
So
that.
yeah, if you can stay, I highly recommend it. And if you can go, highly recommend it. It's an incredible place.
Absolutely. So I thought, that being said, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. We genuinely appreciate it, and we hope you'll listen to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you next Wednesday. Tanti abbracci.